Good. All right. Yeah, it's all good. Just getting set up. Okay, perfect. I think we should be good to go then. And just gonna double check one more thing here. And excellent. Good. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our monthly webinar where we look at our content analysis report. I'm excited to be here as always. We have a lot that we're going to cover. And yeah, I'm just going to do a quick round of intros before we dive into the findings of the report. As usual, if you want to be subscribed to these, I'm happy to get you signed up on the Cube Today listing so you can receive these directly every month. Don't worry, we'll also be posting them in case you have any challenges finding the links. We've been doing this now for about 6 months, looking at all the different content that we analyze across the LearnCube network, which includes lots of different news on lots of different topics. And so what we're doing here is to track what people are engaging with most, and then of course asking the question why. So to do this, I'm accompanied by a wonderful group of folks that I'll be introducing right now. I have joined us for the first time in one of these live streams is someone who should not be just behind the scenes because of the amazing work that he does. His name is Vikrant Mane. Vikrant, would you like to introduce yourself for people who don't know you?
Sure. The strategy at Coop Careers. So everything that goes out of Coop Careers is and I also do the research and analysis part for a lot of the brands that learn Coop units.
Very good. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, I like to play a lot of tennis, and I'm very curious for the whole cloud native domain. So it's very interesting. So I'm a curious listener for now for the
Okay.
podcast.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll get into more about how we collect the data because I think this is the first time we'll be addressing this, and this is actually something that people have asked. It's like you're covering a lot of different material articles that are going across the LearnCube network, but how do we go about tracking this? What are the ways in which this is done? So we'll get into that in a second. Next up, I would like to introduce an amazing person. His name is Eddie Knight. Not only is he doing all kinds of cool stuff related to cloud native security, but is also has an incredible voice when it comes to reading classics of literature out loud. Eddie, for people who don't know you, can you introduce yourself and let us know who you are and where you work?
Yeah, I work at Sonatype in the OSPO over there. Sonatype is a supply chain security company that a lot of folks might be familiar with. I'm also pretty active just across all of the Linux Foundation in the OpenSSF, CNCF, as well as Finos, where I kind of got started in my open source career while I was working over at Morgan Stanley a few years back.
Welcome, Eddie. Very nice to have you with us. We'll be looking more closely at the kind of security content that we've been seeing month after month. It's trending very well in terms of engagement, but also we'll be asking Eddie about, the kind of content that he values and important things for folks out there when they're creating, whether it's tutorials or case studies about the things that stand out to folks and what they should be keeping in mind. Last but not least, we have Nick Vermandé. Nick, can you introduce yourself? Tell folks who you are, what you do, where you work?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Nick. I'm currently a developer advocate with ScaleOps. I've been working with Kubernetes for the past, I would say, 9 years now. So it feels an eternity. So I've been working on the networking side of things, security, distributed storage, Kubernetes management, and now resource optimization with ScaleOps. I love to code like fun application to demonstrate, things during talks. So this is really my thing, like Rube Goldberg kind of machines. I really enjoy doing this, working, on the open source kind of world and just learning in public. And other than that, I'm a consistent runner. So the best way, as I always say, to get in touch with me is always, just to follow me on Strava. This is where I'm the most active, probably.
Very good. And looking forward to running you with you in Atlanta if we get a chance to do that. That'd
Yeah,
be great.
definitely.
That'll be really, really good. We got KubeCon coming up. Lots of stuff coming up for KubeCon. We'll probably touch on some of the trends that that folks are expecting to be covered there. It's just really around the corner. It feels like KubeCon's always around the corner, but this time we really mean it. It's coming up soon in November. Now let's dig into the format of this. As usual, we'll be looking at how we analyze the data. So hearing from Vikrant directly. Then the topic analysis, looking at which topics were trending. We have these two wonderful folks with us today. As I said, Eddie will be covering the part about security. And then Nick, we've seen resource optimization appearing time and time again in these reports. People are very curious to consume this kind of content. And so from Nick's experience, creating this kind of content, tutorials, showing people how it's done, we'll be curious to hear what he has to say about that. Then we'll look at the key trends and insights, and then conclusions and recommendations for the following months. So now let's get into this. Vikrant, can you share your experience about how you procure and analyze the data?
Sure. Why? So every social media post that is posted on any of the LearnCube brands is registered as a single entry. So the single entry is then tracked for impressions, clicks. We also analyze which platform we sort of publish this on, and this is done on an hourly basis. So all of these metrics are sort of collected on an hourly basis, and at the end of the month, we aggregate all of these metrics together. So then we get the data for each content based on the platform that it's published on. So we sort of aggregate everything, and then we sort of get a metric for how a content piece has performed, let's say on LinkedIn, and let's see how it differentiates from how it is performed on Twitter, and we get a differentiation there. So then I thoroughly analyze all of these metrics together, and we try to come up with articulated trends for the month, so that we sort of understand that what's currently going on in the cloud data domain, and what's really trending, what is bringing the clicks, what's bringing in the what's bringing in the impressions, and what really is in demand in the current cloud data. Yeah.
Very good. Cool. So without further ado, we will take a look at the topics that trended the best in our August report. So let's take a look. So once again, we see that resource optimization is doing very well in terms of the CTR. We see the overall impressions and the average impressions per piece. Other things that we saw at the previous month, we saw config management. We covered that with Danielle Cook and dug into some of the reasons for that, the things that made that particular topic shine. Then we go further down the list. We see networking, data on Kubernetes, a lower amount of impressions, but still relatively high CTR. So people, seem to be engaging with that more. And as we've said, month over month, we've seen, security coming back time and time again. Vikrant, is there anything that you'd like to comment on in terms of the numbers here?
Yes. So with resource optimization, we've had the highest average impressions per piece. So this metric has been the highest in the last 6 months. So it's really something that's in demand right now. And also with security topics, the thing is the CTR is very high. It's the highest, in fact, in the list. And also it has very good volume. So that's about 85,000 impressions. So that's a good combination of metrics for the top. And otherwise, configuration management has been on the top 2 for the second month running. So it has very good impressions, very good average impressions per piece, and also the CTR is on the high side. Yeah, these are probably the 3 topics that have been very much in demand.
Okay, cool. Let's keep it moving. So in terms of what we saw here, yeah, as Vikrant pointed out, resource optimization topping the charts, and this is an all-time high over the last 6 months. Then if we look at the actual articles, so we can link these, or you can find these in the reports more in detail. If you check out Kube today, we'll also be sharing the link to the report when we post this on YouTube. Well, it's going live on YouTube, but when we share the results on LinkedIn, you can check that out as well. So you can see the actual pieces of content and what about it, what about each piece, was getting people's attention. Of course, it always needs to be the case that what is promised in the title is what's delivered in the article. So it's not, bait and switch or clickbait. But looking at, the perspective of what are the pain points that people are suffering from, and how can the title as well as the content of the article itself, respond to that. And so these are things that are worth keeping in mind. And I'm definitely curious to hear what Eddie and Nick will have to say about this later on. But this is the first time that we've been sharing this more in detail, and I thank Vikrant for preparing this, so we can see what is exactly that we're talking about in terms of what trended so well. So these are the things that we saw across the board. Other things in terms of topic analysis, like I said, configuration management, we spoke about it last month. It's been coming up in terms of popularity in the previous months. So we see this, now going up for 2 months straight. Then, if we're looking specifically at what trended well in config management, these are the topics that were mentioned in terms of the titles of what trended the best across the LearnCube network. Then looking at security, so the highest CTR. So once again, people are hungry for this content. We've seen this now month after month since we started producing these reports, and it seems like security is still a tough nut to crack. Sometimes seeing the overlaps of security with different topics, be it GitOps, be it networking, other areas where perhaps users are looking to find a blend of different topics being covered by particular content creators or in articles that are featured in our network. So these are the examples of the articles that performed additionally well. And so, like I said, we can see the titles, and sometimes it was interesting too. I was just emceeing Edge Case in the Netherlands for the fourth time, and someone was speaking about software supply chain and speaking about SBOMs and asking a crowd of 400 not Kubernetes beginners, but people that have quite a few years of experience with Kubernetes. And yet the amount of people that really seem to be using this in their day-to-day still seem to be relatively quite low. So, where are we at when it comes to adoption? Definitely want to get Eddie's thoughts about that, whether it's, SBOMs or other security-related topics. Because sometimes in certain areas, maybe it feels like everyone's doing these things. But then when you get out into the wild, maybe it's perhaps not the case. And then thinking about if people are trying something for the first time, what kind of content is going to resonate with them best? Then looking at data on Kubernetes content, no surprise that definitely with Eddie and certainly with Nick on this topic, we've crossed paths in the past when I was leading the data on Kubernetes community, and it still seems that it's not only challenging to run stateful workloads on Kubernetes, but perhaps there's a lack of content about it and that people really would like to see more. Then when looking at more specifically on the side of resource optimization, config management, and looking at this in terms of publishing formats, now I want to be turning it over. To. We'll start out with you, Eddie. When it comes to the kind of things that you notice as someone who's working in the security space, when you're looking for articles or information out there, what are the things that you value that help you when you're doing your research, when you're doing your homework?
Ooh, okay, you made that personal. Yeah, so I'm like mildly dyslexic, so the format of an article is like really important for me. But actually, I've found that the LearnCube articles are structured in a really friendly way. So I haven't had any trouble there. I think you're not losing picky folks like myself with the format and structure. That's definitely one of the first things for me. And then I guess to be a little bit more generic is I think this is going to be true for anybody. When we go to look at an article, we want to know immediately whether this is currently relevant, right? Was this true last year or is this true today, right? That's going to be probably one of the very first filters on the usefulness of an article.
Really, really like that. Nick, in your case, when it comes to resource optimization or any Kubernetes topic for that matter, to what extent do you agree with what Eddie just said, and is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, so you mean as a consumer of article, that's
Yes.
Yeah, so usually first the date. So even when I like search on Google, or even though now it's more on LLMs, so we hope that what the LLM says is still accurate, right? But anyway, even if it mentions things, then you still double check on Google anyway. Usually I will put date because you can filter by date when you look for, like advanced parameter, on the top of Google, and you can see the date, the month, the year. And usually this is the first thing I do because, for very popular websites, you may have like article fighting against each other on the first page, but maybe like half of them outdated. It also depends on the concept that I'm looking for. In our field, let's say in IT in general, like distributed systems, of course, there is content that has been valid for years. But if you're looking for like the latest feature or the latest advancement in Kubernetes, of course, you want to filter by date. That's one. And usually I can quickly notice if articles have been written with LLMs. And if it's too disturbing, like I don't mind, reading an article that has been somehow like corrected with AI, no problems. But when it's too obvious and it's very shallow, then I will pass because I've been working like everyone here for a long time in Kubernetes, so I don't like those articles that are just scraping the surface and not going deep. If I'm looking for an information, it means that I need something very technical, very deep, and then yeah, I will just quickly go through the article, scan it. I'm not too bothered by the format, but just I will scan it once. If I see things that are interesting to me, then I will continue. Otherwise, I will just basically skip. And if I want more like thought leadership or state of the industry, then I would more rely on people I know, like I can trust in the industry or that I know are expert in that field, and maybe go and check what their take on that particularly, right?
Very good. Wonderful insights from both of you. Thank you very much. Now, in terms of looking at the articles that did very well, over a 7.5% click-through rate, these are some of the things that we see there. And so thinking about tutorials and walkthrough content, this is the stuff that does the best. So Nick, as you said, if it's just scraping the surface, it's probably not going to be good enough, and certainly not for someone with your level of experience. There's going to have to be more technical information in there. I also like what both of you said, the timeliness of this. How relevant is it? Considering the speed at which this ecosystem moves, updates, releases, deprecations, all these things can be very relevant very quickly. So checking the shelf life of a piece of content, just because maybe it appears high in searches or from an LLM, when did it come out? Is it still relevant now? Is there some kind of an update that we might be missing there? So I think there's a lot to be said for that. And then the topics for these tutorial walkthrough formats. So we saw, networking observability, and then also high performance with topics such as security. So looking at this, I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think another thing too is that with what Eddie mentioned about the format, in terms of accessibility of the content, both in terms of structure, but also keeping in mind that a lot of people that will be consuming it, English isn't necessarily their first language. So making sure that while technical concepts are being covered, that they're being done in a way that's going to be, friendly for someone who doesn't necessarily, who hasn't grown up in an English speaking environment, or is more accustomed to using, technical English at work. So I think there's definitely something to be said for that too. Then, so it seems that, there is a strong opportunity to keep working on tutorials and walkthroughs. Now I want to turn it back over to you, Eddie. In terms of, things that you see standing out in the security area, whether it's with supply chain, other areas that, now we're talking about AI and machine learning all the time as well. What are things that you value when it comes to a good walkthrough or tutorial? What are things that make, that click with you and say, this is definitely something that I would share with others and recommend?
Yeah. Well, I think you kind of hit on it a minute ago. You were talking about the hybrid topics, right? Where it's like security and something else is what's did I understand you correctly? You're kind of saying that's where you're
Yeah.
finding a little bit more traction, right? I that resonates with me. That stands out to me because that's kind of the state that we're in, right? We threw around the concept of shift left for a really long time. And we've tried to get maintainers closer to infrastructure topics, right? DevOps. Then we get DevSecOps, and we try to get infrastructure folks closer to security. But now we're also trying to get maintainers closer to both infrastructure and security. And so this shift left kind of concept has caused a whirlwind of responsibilities and burnout for folks. And so while that might not be true for everybody, I think a lot of people are thriving in this kind of generalist sense. There's also folks who are just just I need exactly this piece of information right now because my table is just overflowing with responsibilities. And so I don't want to go and learn the breadth of this topic. I want to know, how do I figure out my security groups in this specific scenario right now? And so the more granular that we're getting with that, the more useful it's going to be in those situations. That kind of stood out to me. But I'm at danger of going off from your question now if I keep going.
Oh, get dangerous. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just we've got so much going on between compliance and security. We've got the whole rise of the GRC engineering movement, right? So you've got people who have never needed to write a line of code in their life. They're only thinking about security concepts, are now or compliance concepts even, right, are now needing to get in, and their bosses are expecting them to write code that they haven't needed to do before, right? And then we have maintainers, like the Shai Hulud situation this last few weeks, right, where we're desperately needing maintainers to be very keenly aware of the security in their ecosystem and their deployment mechanisms, everything, right? And that can't be shifted off to other people to think about. And so there's just so much that folks are needing to be aware of. And there's so many different people with different responsibilities and skill sets that are needing to think about security right now. So when you can be very targeted in that title and say, hey, I'm going to help you with this specific thing, I think you're solving a problem already by being specific with that article instead of trying to be all over the place.
Like that. And we've talked about this multiple times on our podcast about, when it comes to security, stakeholders, is it only people that are in the security team? What are the basics that every developer needs to keep in mind when it comes to shifting left, avoiding, misconfigurations, which can cause tons of vulnerabilities. In that regard as well, to Nick on the side of resource optimization. I mean, who's going to say, no, we don't want to optimize resources and we don't care about this, just doesn't matter at all. And maybe we'll have one resource optimization specialist on our team and that's going to be it. But getting that buy-in and helping folks, across the board, regardless of their, how much experience they have, to become invested stakeholders in resource optimization, thinking about the kind of resources and content that's going to be helpful for them. To what extent do you find yourself maybe going back to basics, figuring out what level are people at when approaching this topic, and thinking about this from a walkthrough tutorial perspective? What are good ingredients that people should be thinking about if they're trying to help folks become better versed in the world of resource optimization?
Yeah, so I think, Kubernetes, we tend to focus on the most, like the coolest stuff like AI and all, and DevOps, infrastructure as code, all things surrounding Kubernetes, because Kubernetes is a platform to build platform. So we are focusing on operators, all the operational side of things. And sometimes you just notice that people are not super familiar with the basics of Kubernetes, like quality of service, priority class, how does requests, limits work, how does VPA, KEDA, how do you do statistics and performance? Like what is an histogram? What is P90? What is P99? What is VPN missing? Like is also deployment is different from a job in terms of, if something is running 20 minutes per day and have spikes and does nothing for the rest of the day, how do you deal with this through histograms and statistics? How can you make things that are relevant to your business pop up in this kind of resource management things? And I think it really comes to like laying the foundation, as I mentioned, like the topic, how does resource management or resources work in a distributed system? Most of the, if you're as old as me, you probably very familiar with VMware, and VMware had all baked in. It was sort of proprietary. Now, Kubernetes is basic. There's no real okay, a pod is scheduled on node A. If I want to distribute the load, how do you schedule it on node B or C? Well, either you go descheduler or some sort of a homemade thing, and it's going to be a nightmare, or you have to trust another solution, of course, like scale-ups and others, of course. But there's layers. It's like an onions. There are many layers to optimizing resource. But the first question is why people need that. So first, is cost saving, right? Because more optimized resource means less nodes, because most of the time it's over provision, right? So there are three things. There's, of course, cost, performance, and reliability. So you need, for good content within resource management, you need to kind of lay down those three elements. And but fundamentally, the thing that people need to understand first is effectively resources in Kubernetes are static and our workloads are dynamic. And this is fundamentally the first problem to address with people. Then second problem is how do you, what I mentioned about histogram and statistics, how do you measure performance and reduce noise in a continuous fashion? This is the second thing, how to do that. And the third one is how do you automate this on a continuous, in a continuous way. So all those three kind of angle are the three things we need to teach people about. And also the third one, which came out with Kubernetes 134, which is DRA. So now resource, we had memory, CPU, now there's GPU as well. How can you consume portion of a GPU as opposed to reserve the full GPU for your workloads? So now this is entering this new era of resource management where you also need to advise people on GPU and find a way to consume GPU efficiently. So yeah, those are basically the four things that personally I'm trying to focus on to educate people. But yeah, as you said, first, I knew how resources was working in Kubernetes, but you would be surprised how many people still don't know how it really works behind the hood.
I love that. And like I said, that's why sometimes we get in these sort of echo chambers where everyone's really knowledgeable about a particular topic. And then you sort of walk down the street and talk to your average developer, your average, to a lot of folks that aren't necessarily living and breathing this. And you find a much different scenario. Eddie, you wanted to mention something.
I just think that everything that Nick was just going into is a really good example of your point earlier about the hybrid topics, right? Security plus something else. Something that would be really interesting, I think, to read would be a overview. Like, it doesn't even need to be a deep dive. It could link out for deep details, but an overview on why resource optimization failures are a security risk. Because I can think of that right now. I think it'd be a really interesting thing to kind of share out to more people so they know, like, oh, hey, this isn't just the guys in the basement getting excited about big O notation. Like, this is an actual business impacting scenario that we need to be thinking about and getting everybody aware of. That's the kind of article that would be really, really interesting. And I think that's an example of the hybrid topics being something that has a little bit more draw to it.
Really like that. Great. Now, sounds like we have a potential collaboration in the works. That's always good to know too. Now, looking at thinking about the next steps in terms of what really stood out. So, in terms of efficiency in resource optimization, it has dominated. Like I said, time and time again, we've seen this over the last 6 months. So, the amount of impressions that are being generated, and it's, like I said, it's really gotten a lot of attention. Once again, security, though, is still a solid bet. We've seen this again, for 2 months in a row in terms of the CTR performance, and the average performance overall is still very high. So we've seen this a lot, and it's come up in every single one of these webinars that we've done since we got started. So other things in stuff that we've seen on the down, things that have not had as much popularity as in previous months, in terms of infrastructure. Sometimes there's saturation on a certain topic. We saw that also with platform engineering, and we spent so much time talking about platform engineering that's also why, as Eddie rightly pointed out, seeing where these sort of, hybrid crossover topics, because it's kind of like, that not another teen movie or, not another article about platform engineering, like we're getting kind of tired of it. So they're needing, for freshness when it comes to these topics that people might get a little bit sick of just always seeing the same thing over and over again. And as Nick also said, the need for something more niche, the need for something more that's more in depth, and that's not just kind of scraping the surface and repeating things that we've already seen or heard. And as we said already, hands-on tutorials and walkthroughs are by far the best, because it's someone saying, hey, this is what I did, this is my experience, here you can see it. And that way we're kind of, abstracting away the part that it may be coming from a vendor. It's saying, that there is this problem faced by this customer, and these are the challenges they were going through, and this is how they got through it. So yeah, that's what we see. In the previous months, we saw the rise of event-based content, perhaps because of having some pretty poignant, KCDs that were in the ecosystem that got a lot of attention, and thinking about how to maximize, the potential of the spaces that you create with an event, the conversations you can create with an event. We didn't see that as much. Jobs also dropped a little bit there too. But yeah, we saw that 90% of it was tutorials or deep opinionated insights and overviews, not being afraid to take an opinion, saying this is my hill to die on. We see a lot of this with our Cube FM episodes. The comments that we'll get on LinkedIn will be one thing, but the real debates happen on Reddit. So people that aren't afraid to share a strong opinion, that's where we'll see a lot of debate get stirred up there. So yeah, in terms of the stuff that we saw, scaling, resource optimization, and config management content, really doubling down on the tutorial and walkthroughs. So these are the things that we saw. And like I said, also around the events and job side, we didn't see as much engagement with this in the past month. We've seen again and again, we talked about this month after month, that LinkedIn really seems to be the place to be. And getting off, X just doesn't generate as much attention or awareness as it did in the past. Like I said, though, also we definitely do see a lot of stuff happening on Reddit with the content, at least that we post from Cube FM. Last but not least, Eddie and Nick, is there anything that you'd like to share in terms of updates with you going on for the in the next couple of weeks, months, as we get closer to KubeCon? We can start with you, Nick.
Yeah, so I mean, the plan is obviously KubeCon in Atlanta. That's the big one. And then it's going to be, busy end of the year, because they're going to be also, I will be at reInvent in Las Vegas. I mean, Vegas is not my preferred city in the world, but every year is just this early December. I think it's early December. You stay there for 1 week and it's so crowded. I mean, reInvent is always huge. So it's going to be very, very stressful. And I'm going to be tired at the end of the week. And just preparing for the Manchester Marathon in April. So it's going to be starting the prep probably next week. So being consistent and with all the conferences is going to be tough. But we'll make it work.
Very good. What about you, Eddie? What do you got coming up next?
Well, anybody that's in Texas, the Texas Linux Fest is next week, so don't forget about that. Then pretty quick after that, a couple weeks until the Open Source and Finance Forum. That's another Linux Foundation event in New York City, and there's a lot of cloud conversation and a lot of security and compliance conversation there because it's finance based. A lot of really cool conversations, and then that's just rolling us straight into to Atlanta for KubeCon. So that's gonna be pretty fun. Yeah, very very event heavy focus right now, isn't it?
Same boat. And you, Vikrant, in your case, with all the things that you're monitoring, any tennis matches coming up? Anything else?
There's lots of tennis.
Oh, sorry, you're muted.
Yes.
There you go.
The monsoons in my country are over now. Rainy season is over now. I can play some tennis finally. And we have the state of the Kubernetes jobs report that we publish every quarter. That's coming up. That's very interesting.
Very good. We're looking forward to that. Thank you so much for joining us today, Vikrant. We'll definitely be having you back in future editions. Nick and Eddie, thank you much for your time and insights. Always a pleasure. Folks, like I said, if you want to get signed up to this to get these regular, sent to you in your email, we won't spam you with anything else. It'll only be these reports. But if not, you can find them on Cube today. We'll be sharing them on socials. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good one. Take care.
Don't forget your running shoes for Atlanta.
I will definitely not forget my running. I will have new running shoes for Atlanta, so don't you worry about that. All right. Take care.
Yeah, take care.